There is a grain that has been growing quietly on the windswept plateaus of the Andes Mountains for more than 5,000 years, a grain so revered by the ancient Inca civilization that they called it Chisaya Mama, the mother of all grains, a grain so nutritionally extraordinary that NASA once studied it as a candidate food for long-duration space missions. What I am about to tell you today may genuinely change the way you think about your bones, your muscles, and the way your body navigates menopause, because this single grain contains something that almost no other plant food on Earth can offer, something that directly addresses the two most devastating physical consequences women over 50 face every single day, often without realizing the damage is quietly unfolding inside their bodies right now. But before I reveal what this grain is, I need you to understand exactly what is happening inside your body during menopause, because the truth is far more alarming than most women have been told, and the science behind it is both fascinating and deeply urgent. When a woman enters menopause, typically between the ages of 45 and 55, her ovaries gradually cease their production of estrogen. And this decline is not gentle or subtle. It is a dramatic plummeting that can reduce circulating estrogen levels by as much as 90% over the course of just a few years. Now, most women associate estrogen with reproductive function, with fertility, with the menstrual cycle, and that is certainly true. But what many women do not realize is that estrogen is also the master architect of bone integrity, a silent guardian that has been protecting your skeleton every single day of your adult life through an extraordinarily sophisticated molecular mechanism that I want to explain to you right now. Deep inside your bones, there is a constant, invisible battle between two types of cells. Osteoblasts are the builders, laying down fresh bone tissue by depositing calcium and phosphorus into crystalline structures called hydroxyapatite, the mineral matrix that gives bones their remarkable strength. Osteoclasts are the demolition crew, breaking down old or damaged bone so it can be replaced. In a healthy premenopausal woman, these two forces exist in a beautifully regulated equilibrium, and estrogen is the conductor of this orchestra, keeping the osteoclasts in check. Estrogen achieves this through a remarkable signaling pathway involving a molecule called osteoprotogerin, or OPG. Think of OPG as a molecular shield. It binds to a receptor called RANKL on the surface of osteoclast precursor cells and prevents those precursors from maturing into full, active, bone-eating osteoclasts. As long as estrogen levels remain healthy, OPG production stays high, RANKL is kept in check, and your bones remain dense, strong, and resilient. But when menopause arrives and estrogen begins its precipitous decline, OPG production drops dramatically, RANKL is suddenly unleashed without opposition, and osteoclast activity surges to levels your body has never experienced before. The result is devastating. Women can lose up to 20% of their total bone density in the 5 to 7 years immediately following menopause, a rate of loss so rapid that it can transform a perfectly healthy skeleton into one riddled with the porous, fragile architecture of osteoporosis in what feels like the blink of an eye. And that is only half of the story, because there is another silent thief that arrives alongside bone loss during menopause, a condition that specialists call sarcopenia, and it is every bit as dangerous as osteoporosis, even though it receives far less attention. Sarcopenia is the progressive, accelerating loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength that begins around the age of 30 but intensifies dramatically after 50, particularly in women whose estrogen levels are falling. You see, estrogen is not only a guardian of bone, it is also a critical facilitator of muscle protein synthesis. the process by which your body takes amino acids from the food you eat and assembles them into new muscle fibers. Estrogen helps activate satellite cells, those remarkable stem cell-like precursors that reside within your muscle tissue and are called upon whenever muscle needs to be repaired or rebuilt. When estrogen declines, satellite cell activation decreases, and simultaneously, the body begins producing higher levels of inflammatory cytokines, molecules like tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin-6 that actively promote muscle breakdown, a process called catabolism. The numbers are staggering. After 50, women can lose between 1 and 2% of their muscle mass every single year. This is the loss of the very tissue that allows you to climb stairs, carry your grandchildren, and maintain the balance that prevents catastrophic falls. Falls that in women over 65 carry a mortality rate that should alarm every one of us. Imagine your muscles slowly dissolving, their fibers becoming thinner, infiltrated by fat tissue, and you begin to understand why sarcopenia has been called the silent epidemic of aging. If you have been noticing these changes in your own body, the subtle weakening, the feeling that your bones ache in ways they never did before, the sense that your physical foundation is shifting beneath you, I want you to know that I have put together a comprehensive resource in the description below this video that explains exactly how to assess where you stand right now and what immediate steps you can take to protect yourself. Now here is where this story takes a remarkable turn because there exists a grain, that same ancient grain I mentioned at the beginning of this video, that addresses both of these devastating conditions simultaneously, and it does so through a combination of nutritional properties that is almost unheard of in the plant kingdom. Let me describe these properties to you one by one, and I want you to pay close attention because when I finally reveal the name of this grain, you may be surprised by how accessible it is, by how easily it could become a part of your daily life starting today. First, this grain is a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids that the human body cannot manufacture on its own: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. These are the fundamental building blocks from which your body constructs every muscle fiber, every enzyme, every strand of collagen. Most plant foods are missing one or more of these amino acids, which is why food combining matters in vegetarian diets. But this grain contains every single one of them in biologically significant quantities. And there is one amino acid in particular where this grain truly distinguishes itself: lysine. Most grains, wheat, rice, oats, corn, are notoriously deficient in lysine, which is precisely the amino acid that plays a critical role in calcium absorption in the intestines and in the synthesis of collagen, that structural protein that forms the organic framework upon which bone minerals are deposited. Without adequate lysine, your body simply cannot absorb calcium efficiently, no matter how much calcium-rich food you consume, and it cannot build the collagen scaffold that gives bones their essential flexibility and resistance to fracture. This grain provides lysine in abundance. Second, this grain contains an extraordinary constellation of bone-supporting minerals working in synergy. It delivers magnesium, absolutely essential because magnesium is what your kidneys require to convert vitamin D into its active form, calcitriol. And without calcitriol, your intestines cannot absorb calcium no matter how much dairy you consume. It delivers phosphorus, which combines with calcium to form hydroxyapatite crystals, the mineral backbone of your skeletal system. It delivers manganese, a cofactor for the enzymes that build new bone tissue. And it delivers iron, which addresses the crushing fatigue so many menopausal women experience, fatigue that prevents them from engaging in the weight-bearing exercise critical for maintaining bone density. Third, and this is the property that truly sets this grain apart from virtually every other food in the world, it contains natural phytoestrogens, plant-derived compounds that have the remarkable ability to bind to estrogen receptors in your body, particularly to a receptor subtype called estrogen receptor beta, and to provide a gentle, modulating estrogenic signal that can partially compensate for the estrogen your ovaries are no longer producing. These are not synthetic hormones. These are not pharmaceutical interventions. These are naturally occurring molecules that have co-evolved with the human diet for thousands of years. Molecules that can ease the severity of hot flashes, support the health of vaginal and urinary tissues, and, most critically for our discussion, slow the rate of bone resorption by partially restoring the OPG, signaling that estrogen decline has disrupted. And that grain, that ancient, powerful, extraordinary grain that contains complete protein, bone-building minerals, and natural phytoestrogens all wrapped in a single, tiny seed, is one that you may already have sitting in your pantry right now. It is quinoa. Yes, quinoa, the grain that most people think of as merely a trendy side dish, as an Instagram-worthy addition to salad bowls and smoothie bars, is in fact one of the most scientifically validated foods on Earth for supporting the menopausal body through its most challenging transitions. And I am not saying this as a matter of opinion or dietary fashion. The research on quinoa's nutritional profile, its amino acid composition, its mineral bioavailability, and its phytoestrogenic compounds has been accumulating steadily in the peer-reviewed scientific literature for more than 2 decades, and the evidence is compelling. Let me tell you about a woman named Margaret. Margaret came to see me when she was 58 years old, and she was terrified. She had been a marathon runner in her younger years, one of those women who seemed to embody vitality itself, who crossed finish lines with her arms raised and her face radiant with the pure joy of physical achievement. But at 53, the joint pain began, first in her knees, then in her hips, a deep, gnawing ache that no amount of stretching or ice seemed to relieve. She reduced her running, then stopped entirely, and when a DEXA scan revealed a T-score of -2.1 at her lumbar spine, firmly in the range of osteopenia, just 1 step away from full osteoporosis, she sat in my office with tears running down her cheeks and said, "I feel like my body is betraying me." When I reviewed Margaret's diet, I found something surprising. She had been eating what she believed was healthy, lean chicken breast, green salads, white rice, but her mineral intake, particularly magnesium, was well below optimal levels. I introduced quinoa as the foundational grain in her diet, prepared differently each meal to prevent monotony. A warm breakfast porridge with cinnamon and walnuts, a hearty base for lunch salads with roasted vegetables, a savory side with herbs and lemon at dinner. We combined this with weight-bearing exercise, walking with a weighted vest, body weight squats, resistance band work, and Margaret committed with the same fierce determination that had once carried her across marathon finish lines. 14 months later, her repeat DEXA scan told an extraordinary story. Her T-score had improved from -2.1 to -1.6, a half-point improvement that represents a genuinely significant reversal of bone loss, a change in the direction of building rather than losing. But the changes went beyond the numbers. Her nails, thin and brittle during menopause, were now strong and smooth. Her hair had new growth coming in thicker than it had been in years. And her energy had returned, not the jittery, caffeinated energy of someone pushing through exhaustion, but the deep, sustained vitality of a body genuinely well-nourished at the cellular level. Margaret did not just slow her bone loss, she rebuilt a part of herself she had believed was lost forever. And then there is Diana. Diana was 52 when she first came to my attention, and her story illustrates the other half of quinoa's extraordinary power. Its ability to combat sarcopenia and rebuild muscle that menopause has stolen. Diana had entered menopause early, at 47, and the hormonal shift had been brutally abrupt. Within 18 months, she had lost so much muscle strength that she could no longer open glass jars without assistance, that climbing a single flight of stairs left her winded and trembling, that she had stopped attending her yoga classes because she could no longer hold a downward dog position for more than a few seconds without her arms shaking uncontrollably. "I feel like I aged 20 years in 18 months, she told me during our first consultation, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the floor. Diana was a longtime vegetarian, and when I analyzed her dietary patterns, I discovered the critical gap accelerating her muscle loss. Her protein came almost exclusively from white rice, pasta, bread, and occasional beans, foods that individually are incomplete proteins, missing essential amino acids her muscles desperately needed. Her intake of lysine and leucine was dramatically insufficient. Leucine is perhaps the single most important amino acid for muscle preservation in aging women, because it is the molecular key that activates the mTOR signaling pathway, the master switch that tells your muscle cells to begin protein synthesis. Research has shown that aging muscles develop anabolic resistance, requiring roughly 30 to 40% more leucine per meal to trigger this response than a younger woman would need. Diana's diet was not approaching this threshold. I restructured Diana's nutritional approach around quinoa as her primary grain, replacing the white rice and pasta that had been the foundation of her meals. 1 cup of cooked quinoa delivers approximately 8 grams of complete protein, including all 9 essential amino acids in ratios that the human body can efficiently utilize. Combined with her existing intake of beans and vegetables, this single change dramatically elevated her overall protein quality and, critically, brought her leucine intake into the range necessary to overcome the anabolic resistance of her aging muscles. We paired this dietary shift with a progressive resistance training program, starting with the lightest resistance bands and gradually increasing to bodyweight exercises and eventually light dumbbells. The transformation was remarkable. Over the course of 10 months, Diana's grip strength, which I had measured at our first session as a baseline, improved by nearly 30%. She could open jars. She could climb 3 flights of stairs without pausing. She returned to her yoga classes and held downward dog for a full minute. But the changes that moved Diana most deeply were the visible ones. The definition that returned to her arms, the firmness in her thighs, the way her clothes began to fit differently as she lost 8 pounds of the fatty tissue that had infiltrated her muscles and replaced it with lean, functional, metabolically active tissue. "I can see myself again," she told me one afternoon, and I understood exactly what she meant. She was not just seeing her muscles. She was seeing the woman she had feared was disappearing, the woman whose physical presence in the world had been slowly, silently eroding until quinoa and movement brought her back. For those of you watching right now who recognize yourselves in Margaret's or Diana's stories, who feel that same fear, that same frustration, that same sense of losing ground to forces you cannot see, I have put together a detailed guide in the description below that walks you through a structured, practical approach to rebuilding your strength and protecting your bones after 50. And I encourage you to take a look at it today, because every day matters. Now, let me share some practical wisdom about incorporating quinoa into your daily life. The first step is always rinsing. Quinoa seeds are naturally coated with saponins, bitter compounds that serve as the plant's pest deterrent. And while most commercial quinoa is pre-rinsed, an additional rinse under cold water for 60 seconds dramatically reduces remaining saponins and lowers oxalate levels that can interfere with mineral absorption, significantly increasing the bioavailability of quinoa's calcium, magnesium, and iron. The ideal quantity is approximately 1 to 1.5 cups of cooked quinoa per day, divided across 2 or 3 meals, providing roughly 8 to 12 grams of complete protein along with substantial portions of your daily magnesium, phosphorus, and manganese requirements. Here is a crucial insight many guides miss. Quinoa's benefits are amplified enormously when paired with vitamin C-rich foods, because vitamin C enhances iron absorption by as much as 300%. A quinoa salad with bell peppers, tomatoes, and lemon juice is not just delicious. It is a biochemically optimized delivery system for bone and muscle nutrition. I recommend rotating between white, red, and black quinoa varieties for both nutritional breadth and culinary variety. One of the most powerful combinations I use in my practice is what I call the quinoa bone bowl, a generous base of cooked quinoa topped with dark leafy greens for calcium and vitamin K, roasted sweet potato for magnesium, pumpkin seeds for zinc, olive oil and lemon juice for healthy fats and vitamin C, and a sprinkle of sesame seeds for additional calcium. This single bowl delivers complete protein, minerals from multiple bioavailable sources, and anti-inflammatory compounds, everything your body needs to build bone and muscle in one satisfying meal. I want you to understand something profound as we close this conversation. The changes menopause brings to your bones and muscles are not inevitable sentences. They are challenges that can be met with knowledge, consistency, and the right nutritional tools. Quinoa is not a miracle cure. It is a remarkably powerful food whose benefits emerge from the quiet, daily act of nourishing your body with what it genuinely needs. Meal after meal, week after week, until those tiny seeds of nutrition accumulate into something extraordinary. Stronger bones, firmer muscles, deeper energy, and the confidence that comes from knowing you are actively building resilience. If this information has given you a spark of hope or a practical direction you can follow starting tonight, I would be deeply grateful if you would share this video with another woman who needs to hear it. A sister, a friend, a mother who may be silently struggling with the same changes that Margaret and Diana faced before they discovered what a single ancient grain could do. And if you are not yet part of this community, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because every week I bring you evidence-based insights on navigating this phase of life with strength, with grace, and with deep, practical knowledge that can transform the way you feel in your own body. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next video.